Kyle, should we be concerned about Elon Musk's Optimus robot as the next Terminator?
The next Terminator? No, not at all. Elon's actually doing it the right way. We are going to learn a lot from this, just like we've learned from Tesla. No, I'm excited to see where he's going with it.
Well, we're eager to talk to you about this, autonomous robots and much more. But Dana, would you just start with the introduction and give a little background about Kyle?
Yeah, Kyle Snyder boasts 25 years of experience in autonomous systems and aerospace with a focus on AI-driven tech solutions. His career spans roles at NASA, Lockheed Martin, and AI product management at Velocity. Kyle founded Flyabout Strategies, offering strategic planning for the aviation industry. Before joining Michael Best Consulting, he managed a $10 million robotics integration program for the Department of Homeland Security. In academia, Kyle directed the Next Gen Air Transportation Consortium in Middle Tennessee University's UAS program. He holds an FAA remote pilot and PMP project management professional certificates and actively contributes to advisory boards and committees, including Kent State University and AUVSI. His educational background includes an aerospace MBA, a math MS, and a computer science BA. In the community, Kyle serves on the Catawba Board of Visitors here in North Carolina, and he was the former president of alumni board there and mentors at the University of Tennessee Health Integrated Business and Engineering program. Kyle, welcome.
Excited to be here. I threw enough acronyms in there for you that I think we've got plenty we can talk about today just on acronyms. All good stuff.
And we are glad that we're going to venture away from all the rage.
Chat GPT, right?
Something different. Everybody thinks that's what AI is all about because of a lot of reasons. And you're going to open up, I'm sure, for us a whole new world that maybe is not so well talked about.
No, that's right. I mean, AI today is further ahead than we were 20 years ago when I first started doing this stuff. But we're still nowhere close to what we all expect AI to really get to, like what Elon's doing there with Optimus. So looking forward to having the discussion, guys. Appreciate the time on the call here.
Well, why don't you just kind of tell us the landscape? I read your bio, but tell us in kind of simple terms what you've worked on, what revolutions have come out of that, and what maybe you're working on presently.
Yeah, sure. No, appreciate it. So we'll go back to history. Kind of when it got started, we were doing knowledge-based kind of expert rule systems, AI for decision aiding for autonomous systems. So drones back at the turn of the century, if we will, bigger drones, right? We weren't talking about small quadcopters. We're really talking F-16 sized aircraft that needed that level of autonomy for what's the operator need to know, right? How do we do airspace integration? And the joy of that was at the same time, NASA was working on what they called their Small Aircraft Transportation System, SATS. And this was the initial transition to digital infrastructure for aviation. And so how do you do decision aiding for pilots that are actually on board, right? Kind of a cockpit or a co-pilot in a box kind of concept. So all of these things have evolved here over the last 20 years into where we're at today with how do we actually put autonomous systems out? And there's been some exciting announcements here in the last couple of weeks about how the Department of Defense wants to embrace this on a defense side of things. And then we've seen the explosion of the drone world over the last 6, 8, 7 years since the FAA opened up the regulatories with small drone licensing back in 2016. And since then, right, we've got over 1 million aircraft that are registered in the FAA database that are small drones, a couple 100,000 new pilots, 100,000 pilots, right? I mean, it's kind of exciting to see it, even if some of us never leave the ground when we're flying. It's pretty cool. But how do we continue to advance this technology to get into the things like we're seeing with package deliveries with Walmart and Drone Up, where Amazon wants to get to, and then even to start expanding that into and this is where I'm spending a lot of my time these days in advanced air mobility, AAM, the concept of electric aircraft and air taxis and this kind of regional air mobility of how do I fly maybe from Asheville, North Carolina to the beach without having to go through big airports. this kind of like 100-mile range kind of concepts that it's faster, it's more predictable to fly, and reduces the ground transportation because I can just get up and get over it and really take advantage of that third dimension of transportation. And that's really the future that I think we should all be aiming towards, right? The George Jetson concept I've used for a long time, even before it got popular a couple of years ago, because the Jetsons was set in 2062, right? 100 years after they started making the cartoon. Well, that means George was born last year, right? 2020, 2022. So, and really, I look at Elroy as kind of the Amazon package delivery kind of thing, right? The first autonomous drone. It's not like Elroy was piloting his little pod when he got shot out to go to school. But how do we really kind of do this of whether it's Jetsons or Fifth Element or pick your sci-fi movie of we've got access to the third dimension. How do we grow there? So that's where I spend a lot of my time talking both on the technology side, the aircraft manufacturers, the autonomy of how do we make these things smarter? How do we make the system smarter, right? How do we help the FAA of integrating all of these aircraft? But at the same time, let's paint that picture, but know that a lot of things are going to happen in the next 15, 20 years, just like, when we all got our iPhones put in our pockets back in 2007 and how that changed the world. So it's exciting times. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. And I think we get to see a lot of really cool things happen over the next 20 years.
I'd like to hear from you is the evolution, because you talked about rule-based and now we have, more processing power. I mean, you've been involved in this long enough. There's been a tip from more of a rule-based AI system to using deep learning and other tools. Would you talk a little bit about that transition and what that meant? Because that to me was a tipping point when we had, higher processing power, we had more data available, we had the ideas of course, deep learning and neural nets have been around for a long time. It just didn't have the data to crunch on. And that transition, because it sounds like you've been involved long enough to give a little bit of a history lesson of how it tipped.
No, that's exactly right. And we could even go back before that, right? I mean, when we first started getting kind of localized computing is when the AI boom first started happening in the early 80s. And that was just, okay, we can all do this. And then it was like, no, we really don't quite have enough computing. We don't really have even software. We didn't have code. We didn't have languages that were going to support that. So we kind of saw this bloom of symbolic processing that happened in the late 90s and the early 2000s that gave us this opportunity to do expert systems and rules-based systems of, if I can, prescribe all of this, right? Let's take standard operating procedures and code that up and say, well, here's what this guy would do under this situation and this situation, and provide some boundaries that we can figure some things out in here. Neural nets were getting started, like you said, but the computation there wasn't really fast enough and it wasn't local enough, and it took a whole bunch of work to get there. Well, now we've had this evolution of localized processing, great advances in how do we do this kind of on the edge. And so we're able to do some more processing, take in some of that sensing, but we still don't have that cognition piece of what am I doing? What am I trying to accomplish, right? We've seen the large language models provide that statistics of if all these situations are kind of the theme that happens a lot, right? Kind of like the keyword search of, if I'm looking for this word, this is probably what you're looking for. If you're looking for all of these kind of words, and this is where the computation is coming from, of, okay, you're looking for this 7 different keywords. Let me search them all together at the same time. This is probably the answer. It's a great start, but it still doesn't necessarily understand the context of what we're doing. So there's still some value from some of those knowledge-based and rules-based systems of, let's combine those kind of structures of, this is the application, this is the intent we're trying to capture, plus this ability to do some cognition or some computation, plus what's really cool now is the advanced sensing kind of tools that we're getting now to provide that context and the situational awareness of, here's what's going on in my environment, and this is how we're going to get to that kind of higher levels of autonomy, which is really what our goal for AI is, right? Is let's combine large language models and this kind of natural processing, because a lot of people will just talk about Siri and Alexa being, well, that's my AI. I know how to interface with that. Siri ain't that smart. I mean, I talk to her all the time, and she just doesn't quite get it for me. But how do we combine these kinds of things into that next level of there's some boundaries here, but at the same time, you can think all you want to with inside this box, and let's keep moving forward. Because that's really what, when we start talking about autonomous wingman and how do I actually have that human machine collaboration kind of stuff of, I want you to go do this. I don't need you to ask me, is this right? Is this right? Is this right? But just go do it unless I tell you not to, kind of stuff. So we've done some advances, but there's still some more kind of combining the two, I think, of kind of what that next level is going to be.
Now, Martin asked about the evolution. Is it true that you've been working with AI going all the way back to like 2000?
It is. That Velocity company, actually at the time we were called Applied Systems Intelligence, was a small AI company. I was employee number 20. And it was doing that kind of symbolic reasoning for knowledge-based AI. And a lot of people today would say that wasn't AI, but we were 100% using it in that application of how do I make my pilot smarter? How do I make my system smarter by thinking through these processes and prescribing ahead what to do with it.
You know, the newest Sony camera, the 6700, now has a AI processing chip where it locks on. You can tell it, is it a bird, a human being, a car, or a plane? And it's pretty exciting because it tracks and makes a little stick figure. So if the person turns around with other people, it's going to project or follow, that turn. So we're seeing more things that will be coming down that are hardware processing to help speed up some of that time as well.
Oh, 100%, right? That's the explosion of NVIDIA this year is that computing ability on the edge, plus the sensors there on the edge, plus the analytics tools, right? Of not only can I see everything that's going on here, but how do I actually, task it to, right, follow that truck, follow me, and combine those kind of skills. And the fact that they've been able to do that, put it all in the processor now, and then throw some connectivity onto it so that it actually has access to the cloud to either add more computing capability, more analytics capability, or to share that within a bigger system. It's really, really exciting. And it's great to know some of my friends that are at NVIDIA and kind of see some of their advancements. It's definitely one of those companies to follow.
Well, Apple just announced their new watches have a higher level of processing. Clearly, they don't have the software even match it. But they're doing it so that it can do more conversations and handle problems without having to send everything up to the cloud and bring it back, which is, the Amazon device. I'm not going to mention the name or my house will light up. The Amazon device is now like 10 years, and it's amazing what little progress they made in that time. I think they were concerned. They thought everyone would buy things, and most of the time they're just asking the weather. So, we've had almost mini AI winters since the big shifts that occur with a lot of these companies, because they just assumed if I build it, it would make money.
Oh, that's right. A lot of people have tried to do the autonomous robot, assist kind of thing, and it's just not there yet. How do I use this system? The iRobot Roomba vacuum cleaner thing is a great example of this is how far the technology is, and this is what I can reliably expect it to do. So I will use that, and I will ask Alexa and Siri, what is the weather today? What's my directions to get to where I'm trying to get to? Because that stuff is pretty easy to do. The higher level stuff, we're just not there yet, but at least we are kind of taking that step forward.
Your familiarity with, of course, Elon is the great marketer. I'm not sure, I'm going to give him more credit as a marketer than a beyond genius, in my view. No offense, Elon, if you're watching, but I give him first stars in marketing. He's, of course, taking the knowledge they learned from the car and trying to now map that onto his robots. And I think that does have promising, and that's a good idea when you have a huge database of all these cars out there now for a while, tracking real world scenarios, working out problems. In fact, they have a Tesla, but you just rode in one of the autonomous systems and you saw some of the pros and cons of it. But I do like that idea. Can we take that database and transfer? Now, that's not general AI yet, but it's a little step forward.
No, that's exactly right. And those are the steps that we've got to take. We've got to start somewhere and put things out. Are we ready for that fully autonomous fleet of cars out running around and picking everybody up and picking up cargo and fully integrated? No, but we are getting better. And one of the interesting things about the car model and where I think we're going with Optimus is those lessons learned are immediately either pushed to the cloud so that they're part of the next collective brain, Borgish, if you will, going to Star Trek of we've all learned from this. Now we can apply it for the next lesson, for the next opportunity versus I've got a 14-year-old at home, right, who's going to start learning. Unfortunately, I can't just download, here's all the lessons you need to know of this is what it takes to drive. So are cars and humanoid robots and these kinds of things going to learn and improve faster than the next generation pilot, driver, this kind of stuff? It's an interesting time in history because I think we're going to get there where I think the technology and the machines are going to start accelerating faster than the rest of us.
Well, right now, I'd rather have a robot running a car than a texting human being. I remember the good old days of drunk drivers where at least you could tell they're swerving because of alcohol, not just because they're watching Netflix while they're pretending to drive. So I think, the incompetency of human beings on the road in danger is going to be AI's greatest advantage in getting out there.
Right, that's exactly right. To them, the driving is the distraction. It's not the texting and what else I'm doing. It's the fact that I've got to sit here and drive when shouldn't this system be smart enough to do it? Shouldn't I not have to sit at a stoplight at 3:00 in the morning when there's nobody else on the road? So all of this stuff is actually at the point now where I think we're going to start seeing some changes.
Where should people be paying attention in this topic? Because obviously, Dana and I, we have training and my other associate in understanding education in AI, understanding where they need to be. But I want to hear yours. Where should professionals be paying attention? What is the next tipping point that we should be listening for? Where are we stuck? That as far as keeping up, because I think every professional needs to be keeping his pulse on what's going on. And it's tough because all the clickbait of the news, which we don't have news anymore, we just have commentary and propaganda, is just trying to get our attention. So that's where we go to people like you to go, what is the level now? What should be watching? And what are we looking for as a tipping point of the next transition?
I appreciate that question. And I'll take the chance to kind of toot the horn here at Michael Best. As this is why I was excited to join this firm. They came to me and said, we see that this autonomous transition is happening. We want to start a consulting practice to specifically help with that acceleration and get everybody ready for it. So they said, hey, can you start Autonomous Insights as a consulting practice to say, let's go develop the technology. How do we help transition that? Or from communities that are ready to embrace it. And then here just this summer, inside our legal side, kind of the main firm at the enterprise, we've appointed an AI officer, chief officer, and kind of moved her up into the bigger picture to say, we've got these AI services across the whole firm. So to answer your question directly, data privacy is the big one. Most companies now have data management policies. Where do we take it from? What kind of data are we pulling in? What are our client requirements for how do we protect it? How do they protect it? Well, from our side, we can do both, right? We can help them with make sure that your policies are updated and you know how to do that analysis of if you're integrating AI tools, what does that mean? Are you considering those policies if you've got them in place, or as you're hiring the tool, you're bringing in the tool, let's make sure that you've got the structures there because those services are going to be critical. So we're able to throw a bunch of different capabilities at folks that are trying to do that, right? So data privacy tools and data services kind of stuff are the 100% first thing you need to be thinking through. Something else to kind of think through is ethics and responsible use or development of the technology. This is a hot button for us. And it was interesting when they framed it up to me from a legal perspective of lawyers. Ethics are part of their daily activities, right? They can only pick so many projects. When they are going into projects, we've got to make sure we're conflict deconflicted. and then also making sure that they align with their ethical principles as attorneys. Well, let's apply that then to say, not only do we understand, we treat ethics as part of our daily activities, but now, thanks to my practice and some of the technologies we're looking at, let's make sure that these things are used for what they're supposed to be used for and fit within those ethical principles. So one of the first questions we ask is, does your company have an ethics policy already for, as we're planning through things, do we have kind of that predetermined thoughts of what ethics mean? Do we think about actions of ethical or ethical actions coming out of those decisions, or what are the consequences on the backside? So what turns out from this? So as we think about this of, okay, now you're using these tools, maybe you do or do not know the thoughts behind them, how those models were built, all the data that goes into it. Is it just your data? Is it somebody else's data? Did you just post your data? So making sure that you're thinking through those processes on top of how's it being used is critical, and the kinds of stuff that I think that we're trying to get out ahead of to support companies that are doing it. So it definitely don't just think we can go buy one and let's just go plug it in and think that there's no consequences.
Yeah, well, because you're especially when you're bringing in large amounts of data. Okay, you're bringing that data and holding it, and it potentially might have some it may have data of customers or other stuff that gets leaked. We have a huge liability risk. How are we collecting the data we need, but still protecting the privacy of the individual, and really thinking that through? The other thing I love you talked about is building what are the ethics of the business, because these systems have no intrinsic ethics. They have to be built into the systems and know what that is.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because to say that they're not ethical systems from the start is kind of a misnomer, because whoever programmed them, whoever built those models, there's definitely probably some level of ethics built into it, or there could be. And this was some of the research done 15, 20 years ago, that there's some presumptions that robots and autonomous systems could be more ethical than humans, because you take out bias, you take out situational learning of, you know what, the robot that looked like that is the same one that killed my buddy in the last war or in the last battle. I'm going to go take it out. So we start thinking about this. Robots aren't going to have that kind of stuff. So back to the ethical development of the technology, let's make sure that those companies are doing the right things in addition to the folks that are using it. So, there's a lot of discussions on this. When I was talking to Dana a couple of weeks ago, we had somebody come back after that talk and said, that was the most philosophical discussion I've ever had in a defense discussion. And you didn't even say philosophy. So it's kind of exciting times that AI is now forcing people to kind of think through some of these kinds of things that typically haven't been brought up before.
I think it's great that, your firm and you are able to bring that to the table, because absent that, there was a discussion of maybe pausing AI for a while, right? It's like that kind of discussion came out from Elon. I think some of the other community, like, you should pause it until we have Congress acting on rules and regulations to make sure that, this isn't a train wreck. And the counter argument to that is, well, if they may not be closest to the issue to be able to come up with that just yet. And secondly, if they overregulate it, our companies may lose a competitive edge over China, Russia, India, any other country that's pushing hard on advanced technology. So I think it's great. It sounds like you're kind of closing that gap, offering that reassurance to companies that want to do the right thing with their AI.
No, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So on top of our legal team, consulting stuff that I'm supporting with, we, of course, have our government strategies team, too, that is helping make sure that our policies come together and we can support that development, because it's exactly that. The toothpaste is out of the tube. It's out there. It's going to be in development at this point. And so either it's other countries, companies are going to see the benefit to it, even if they could keep it behind the firewall and say, you know what, we're working on it, we're not releasing it, but we're going to continue to advance the state of the art. We've got to keep doing this now, because this is just the natural evolution of where computing should be going. So it's not a bad thing. And it's great to see that White House is putting out and is working with the community to figure out how do we go forward, what kind of rules do we need to put in place, or what kind of boundaries do we need to put in place. So there's got to be that collaboration between industry and the government, the kind of stuff we didn't really have at the birth of the internet. We learned a lot, I think, since then, which is a positive thing. But at the same time, this is going to move quickly, and that's not necessarily what government and administrations are known for. So we've got to make sure that everybody's kind of adapting quickly, knowing that the world's going to look a lot different in the next 15, 20 years.
Yeah, and fundamental education is really important when you come to legislators. I'll never forget the quote, Mr. Zuckerberg, if it's free, how do you make money? And I go, why is this person allowed to even drive, much less be in Congress? And so growing up in D.C. and knowing the back workings, I'm more concerned that we're getting enough fundamental education so that intelligent, semi-intelligent decisions can be made. Because that's my biggest fear is Washington's really good at making, lobbyists. What should I say now? And then give me something to say online, and no time or bandwidth to actually understand what's coming out of their mouth.
Now, Marty, you make a great point there. And this is something we're working on, a couple of new initiatives that I'm hoping to get launched early next year, specifically at the collegiate level of how does AI and especially ethical and responsible use integrate across curricula, right? So we looked at the internet. Everybody just knows how to use it. We just kind of figured it out. And we're getting to that point that AI is becoming that accessible here in the last, just since the beginning of this year. So we never really included how to teach the internet, how to properly use references, how to build this kind of stuff up. And a couple of guys I talked to last week talked about how Wikipedia is really, it's open source, but it's now becoming a reliable resource that, the information is accurate on there now. So we can reference that. Not that it's gospel or anything, but it is reviewed, it is managed. So how do we do the same kind of stuff with AI? How do we show every curriculum, every degree, every discipline in a school is going to be impacted by AI, whether it's music education, because we're training AI models now to finish pieces, to actually create new, symphonies and orchestras and these kinds of things. That's now a tool available. Or is it over in computer science that are developing the new technologies? Is it use in biology because we're creating new models for evaluating cancer drugs and these kinds of things? So all of this stuff is kind of coming together, and it's kind of exciting, but at the same time, students can't just kind of avoid it. So it's great because the students these days are very digitally friendly. Of course, they're digital natives, so it's not a big transition for them to embrace it. But what's the right way to do that? So we're looking at starting a couple things on that for first of the year.
It's really interesting, Kyle. I spent a lot of years in industrial America, very large Fortune 500 manufacturing. And I've been away from that industry for a number of years. But, when I go to a factory today, it looks so much different than it did just 20, 25 years ago.
It's robots in action every day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I, you think of like even building cars, and I've seen some of the paint spraying robots that, what they can do and how they manipulate and articulate to get a paint spraying job on a car is just remarkable. And so robotization, automation streamlines, it reduces, people are concerned about their job. They're concerned, what's it mean to me? Their finances, economics, all that are all concerns that people have about AI. And I remember at your presentation that I enjoyed so much, you had a picture, and it was more about change management, if I recall. You had a picture of a dinosaur and then the future. And you want to talk about that? Because, it's a great analogy for those of us that want to stick our head in the sands about what's coming.
So I use the kind of the spectrum there of we're all going to be touched by AI at some point. Either you're a developer of the technology, all good. You're going to be a user of the technology for sure. you may be a regulator in that either you could be on the government side, or maybe you're in the corporate side to say we've got a no chat GPT policy that nobody's allowed to use the current method, but you're still the regulator side. The next box I kind of give there is the dinosaur. You can just say, you know what, this ain't real. It's not happening. I'm not worried about it. I don't need to play with this. You can live that way for a while, but you will be extinct because AI is going to impact all of us here before long. And if you're not one of those, or you may be in one of those four, but you could also be on the end of that, which is a storyteller, right? So the Terminator role, kind of get back to where Martin started us off at of, I'm talking about it. It's great. It's sexy. I don't necessarily need to touch it. I don't need to know how all of it works, but this is the future of it all. And so you probably fall into one of those boxes, and I think I fall into a couple of those. Plus, you can throw in the advocacy piece of people like me that get to promote it and say that it is coming. It's exciting technology, and it's going to be pretty cool to see how it keeps growing.
We've heard all the fear, and we've seen the fear mongering about what can go wrong. But, there's so many applications. You mentioned healthcare. Just think about how disabled people will be able to more properly will have more abilities to function from some of the AI technologies that are here or are going to be developed. So, and then just in terms of knowledge base understanding, getting things done faster, better. I mean, all these things are out there, and it's just mind-boggling. The other thing is, in the past, and you have a great analogy, Martin, that you usually talk about how, people have this idea that their job is going to be completely eliminated, and some will. We know that some will. Yep. But you have tell us about that analogy. I think Kyle will enjoy that. The synthesizer and the.
Oh yeah, one of the things I mentioned in one of our interviews is that when the synthesizer first came out, which was a big rack of things, most people don't know that early time, but Keith Emerson got excited from a group called Emerson, Lake and Palmer. He gets on the media and say, this will replace all musicians. I think something close to that, and it was really rudimentary. And my friend Paul's father was a violinist that was hired by often musicians to come in, like, all types of rock and roll musicians and Motown and everything. And he just lived in a panic after that statement, that his job tomorrow would be replaced. Instead of keeping up with what's really going on, if he followed it, he'd go, wait a second. Okay, now they've got something called a mellotron, but it doesn't quite sound like a violin. It's almost a new instrument. It's a tape machine. Now they've got some digital samples of violins, but it can't create them, and so on and so on. Yep. He pretty much, Paul tells the story of his father just kind of living in fear and just grateful he's got the next contract. And I think that's what can happen if people don't make the effort to start finding people, possibly a blog that your biz company writes or something with update on what's really going on. We've got to look beyond the clickbait and find our own avenues of where things really are and keep a pulse on it.
No, I agree completely. And you use the word in there a couple of times of create, right? That's the role that humans are still going to touch way better than any kind of machine, at least in the near future, maybe even the foreseeable future. Of that creativity of let me address a problem, let me look at a problem, look at a situation different than anybody else has, or at least different than maybe anybody else has ever talked about. So playing in that human role of creativity, those are the jobs that are going to still be needed. And that creativity may be, they talk about prompt engineers kind of being a future job that's going to be created. Well, if I'm creatively thinking about what are the right things to prompt with, that's a job that is going to be needed. How do I use the tools? How do I use them appropriately? To your point there with the synthesizer, same thing. It is out there. It is a resource. I got a buddy of mine that uses his chat GPT every night when he puts his kids to bed. They create a new bedtime story every night, right? Let's talk about princesses and frogs and monster trucks. And what are we doing tonight? We're exploring a new universe. So it's pretty cool on what you can do with the tools. but I would definitely not, ever kind of count on a labor intensive job not being automated. And we're already seeing robot waiters and waitresses in restaurants. We're seeing
security,
right
cleaning,
security, cleaning, and back in the kitchens kind of thing of flipping burgers, making Chipotle chips. And it's exciting to kind of see that that is under development, and they're going to continue to improve. So what's that future going to mean? I would definitely either embrace this and say, how do I maintain it? How do I support it? How do I take advantage of it? Or make sure that I'm looking at something else that is not there, because we are going to complement. We're going to continue to see this need for integration of how do I use these tools. And on the healthcare side, like you're saying, Dana, of how does the robot now complement going into an assisted living facility and help with, I've got robot cameras watching to see if anybody falls, but at the same time, how do I have the robot to help respond and kind of keep up with that? And as we think about robots switching into this physical and virtual world, how do we use these tools? It's going to help improve human performance, no doubt.
Yeah, even with Ring, I'm eager for them to be able to identify the difference between a spider web and a Homo sapien. They don't have that yet on my monitor. It's like, someone's in your backyard. No, it's a spider web going across the screen. Come on, guys. You should be doing better than that. Would you talk about the different areas of autonomous that we're going to see in our society? Because everyone's talking about autonomous cars, and of course, their Instagram showing a robot playing ping pong and things like that. But I think it's important that people know some of the variety of the frontiers of autonomous that are currently being used and coming down the pike from your perspective.
Oh, definitely. The future of transportation is autonomy, right? So, driverless cars, and whether that's actually driving people, right? Passenger carrying, or are we talking about small robots that are delivering packages on the ground already? We're seeing that on some college campuses. We're seeing it in some small cities. And as we move towards this smart city, connected city kind of concept, it's going to enable that. So we'll see ground transportation going autonomous. We're going to see more and more drones doing all kinds of things, from inspections and package deliveries up to hopefully the passenger carrying air taxi kind of concept. So whether it's an Uber on the ground, an Uber in the air, let me just go hop into it and get where I want to get to. So beyond transportation, Dana's already talked about robots. We talked about robots in kitchens and these kinds of things. Those will continue to improve, and we'll kind of see that transition of not just the automation of, I know how to flip a burger every 3 minutes, I flip it back over, but a little more interaction. And that's some of the stuff we're seeing with the service robots. And so we start thinking beyond that kind of stuff, and we start getting up to system levels of, well, now how does the government say manage all these robots and kind of keep up with where that's at? Back to can we get rid of street lights, right? Do we not need red, yellow, green anymore, because all the cars are communicating to the infrastructure and they're spacing themselves out, and we start moving to that kind of world? I think we're a long ways from that, especially from just kind of the human acceptance of how do we transition. And at the same time, there's always going to be somebody that wants to drive, just like there's always going to be somebody that wants to fly their airplane. So it's going to take some time. And then I think we're going to just see more of that in-home automation or autonomy use of all that data that's just available. And that's where things start getting squirrely, of how much information have I really put out? My phone's keeping up with things. My camera here is keeping up with things. What else are we doing with all that? And where do those lines start to draw? So we're actually doing some research into some of that kind of stuff too, of based on your buying principles and your travel principles and all these kinds of things. And all that information is available, and we start processing it. We start looking at patterns of life kind of information. That comes back to the policy stuff and what we're doing with that on the data privacy side.
Kyle, just out of curiosity, you talked about drones and pilot licenses for that. I forget what it's called, 107 or whatever. What do I need to do to get a 107 pilot license to fly a drone?
That's a great question, Dana. So 2016, the FAA launched the Part 107 small drone commercial license. So if I'm going to go operate and do roof inspections or survey work or these kinds of things, that's the license for doing it. And so to do that, you've got to take a knowledge test with the FAA that says, I understand airspace, I understand the rules I'm going to fly by. You don't necessarily have to own your drone yet. You may have never even sat in an airplane. But you've got to take that test. That's a 50-question test that says, I understand what it takes to safely go put this up in the air. So you've got to do some homework on airspace management, understanding charts, and then the homework on some of the rules of what it takes to go fly, and what the appropriate use is, and what conditions you can and can't fly in. So typically a week's worth of studying. If you've got a little bit of aviation experience, maybe 2 weeks. If you don't have any experience, we can kind of get you there and ready to go. But it's exciting. And then all of this is going to start transitioning here over hopefully the next year or two, and start moving into beyond line of sight operations, so I can start managing package delivery drones and some of these kind of things. So I'd recommend getting out and getting it done. It's definitely worth it to say I'm an FAA certified pilot.
Well, yes, I have a photographer that is, and so it's exciting to learn. But I'll tell you, one photographer who was a pilot said it was kind of close to what he had to learn versus the training on the plane of being a pilot. So he said it's not just study one thing and you're done. So it really took some effort.
Oh no, it's going to show that you understand aviation decision making and what it takes to go put an aircraft in the air safely.
I know that a passion of yours and the firm is to help companies, with new product development and commercializing those. And it seems to me, if you look at the history of innovation and the industrial revolutions, let's say, jobs and companies either survive and thrive, or they go out of business, right? And you mentioned like streetlights, it may be a way off, but I'm not sure I want to invest in or run a streetlight company right now. Those things cost, that's a pet peeve of mine, by the way, because I favor roundabouts. But, I looked it up one night. I was walking downtown in Cary, where I live, North Carolina, and like, it costs between $250,000 and $500,000 to put in streetlights. Okay. And then you have the annual maintenance. Okay. So, I'm not sure I want to be in that business if, these sensors and everything are gonna make it so you don't need that. But, what are some of your thoughts about new product development and companies what can they do? I'm running a company now. They're always very traditional, right? New product development's hard for them to do. It's usually the smaller companies that come in and then they absorb them, acquire them. But there's some things that mid-sized, larger companies should be thinking about in terms of new product development to bring themselves into the future.
No, that's a great question. I'm glad you kind of went down the infrastructure path there, because if you're into this world of how do I enable AI, how do we help advance this kind of thing? If I'm a software company and I'm building AI solutions, it's going to take some infrastructure behind that to support it. If I'm on the infrastructure side I'm building a new sensor or a new connection or like a new surveillance tool to say, here's what's going on. There's real opportunities there to say, let's go integrate, let's go partner. And what we like to focus on is what is that path to operations, right? It's not just, okay, this is cool. This is how you could partner with, say, a Verizon, an AT&T, a T-Mobile, but where do we want to embrace this? And Cary is a great example. Cary's been one of these smart city integration labs to show off some of these kind of capabilities. And I expect to see them continue to be a test bed for doing that. So companies should look to what communities are embracing this, who do I need to partner with, and then what do I need to do to get to a mature product? Not just here's my lab, here's my prototype, but how much is it going to take to manufacture this, and who are those kind of partnerships that we need to do? And that's really where we come in. We like helping map that out and making sure we actually can develop execution plans to go take it that far. So that's where we'll work with the companies and we'll work with the communities to take these things and say, this is what it's going to take to get it out and keep it driving.
Well, that's very exciting. And by the way, what are your favorite robots of all time?
Oh boy, favorite robots of all time. Sci-fi wise, definitely Data from Star Trek. That is true autonomy when we start talking about his brain and everything that goes into it. Although you could see if you ever watch the shows that there were still plenty of questions that he just didn't creatively think about. So there was always the need for him to work with the rest of the crew. So Data is always kind of the example there. Let's go with the positronic brain and see if we can get to that point someday. And then I guess in real world scenarios, today it would be the Mars helicopter Ingenuity, since it is still flying.
Wow.
56 flights over 2 years after they did the first flight. So 2 years after first flight, here we are now with 56 flights when we were hoping to get to 5. And the fact that this doesn't make enough noise is really kind of disappointing to me from our media perspective. These are the kinds of stories that show innovation and autonomy, and at the same time, it also kind of shows what human ingenuity can do and what we can push towards. So kids these days are going to already have had this. We've had rovers on Mars in the modern world since 1997. Which is really pretty cool to think that we're coming up on almost 30 years of that. And now we've got a helicopter out there. Hopefully gets another couple of flights under its belt at least, and who knows where it's going to go. But definitely proud of what that team's done, even though I had nothing to do with it.
Take a moment to explain to people, if they don't know, how amazing that is and how it is using AI to make that helicopter work, because this is quite a profound thing that if I find a good link on it, I'll put in the text below, that they ought to notice.
No, it's great. So we never flown outside the Earth's atmosphere, so we knew what Mars's atmosphere was going to be, but we never built a system. We couldn't really fly a system with any kind of distance to know that it was going to last. So we've done some test flights here with Ingenuity, but to put it into the operating environment and to know that's why they were hoping for 5 flights. So the density of Mars's atmosphere is like 1%, 2% of Earth's atmosphere. So just be able to build a system that could spin fast enough, get up and do its thing. It may not fly for longer than a couple of minutes, which it doesn't, but that's been long enough that it's been able to get up, do its survey to see where it is, and then it uses AI to determine its own landing position, since it's not being remotely operated, right? So it's a 7-minute delay from any communications to get from Mars to Earth. So there's no way we could have a pilot remotely flying that. So it launches, it does its thing, it gets to where it's supposed to go, it looks down, uses its own geo-positioning or its own visual positioning to see where it's at. We don't have GPS clearly on Mars. So it figures it out and says, yes, this is a safe plot for me to go back down and land. It uses the rover as its comms relay. And so for it to be able to figure all that out, keep charging, keep capturing the pictures it uses, and then use those itself for that edge computing like we talked about earlier to figure out where the safe place is to go land, understanding its own constraints is really, really pretty cool. And again, to get up to 56 flights when we were hoping it would do 5, it just blows me away that we've been able to pull that off.
That is a huge story, huge accomplishment. And, you mentioned movies like Star Trek, and those of us that have some age on us remember, movies going back, Space Odyssey, and it's amazing how the sci-fi writers, write the stuff. The technology doesn't exist, but their imaginations are at work on how these things could be, and you wonder how much of that then leads companies and individuals to actually develop the technologies. But I think of like Minority Report when I start seeing stuff, The Matrix, all these things are like you said, the younger kids today, this is normal for them, whereas back then this was really far out stuff. Is there anything is there anything that like is out there that seems really far-fetched today that we can't imagine being developed, but you guys think are going to be developed? Anything come to mind?
Oof, I wish I could say yes, but I struggle with that same thing, that we're in this age of sci-fi becoming realistic, that it's just possible, right? We all carry around our comms, right? We can just kind of hit our chest, hit our Bluetooth and be like, hey, computer, let's go. And it's there, it's doable. So I'm always looking for those kinds of things, or who's kind of out there. I'm glad you bring up Minority Report. I actually had a chance to read that earlier this year. That was like a 25-page book, right? And Philip K. Dick, when he wrote that, it's a short story. There's not a whole heck of a lot there, and the fact that we were able to turn that into the movie and kind of push things out there to where now it's kind of realistic thing when you throw in holograms and the interaction there. So and you start talking about precogs. Even back to kind of where I was going with all this data processing, right? If we're using all these computers, all these cameras that are kind of seeing where we're at and all the rest of this kind of stuff, we may not have precogs that have, a human body that have that kind of future telling, but our AI is getting to that point that it's going to start predicting these kinds of things. And then we've got to figure out really.
When it comes to predictions, and my favorite quote, Martin knows, is, it's by Yogi Berra. Predictions are hard to make, especially if they're about the future. But, it seems to me that predictions about what jobs are going to be out there, what industries are going to, prosper versus those that are going to go down, and whether we're going to benefit from this whole new fourth industrial revolution, I think it depends on your outlook, really. I think if you have and it's like economics, right? If you have an optimistic outlook, you can find substantive reasons to justify your position of optimism, where we're going to make more money, the economy is going to thrive, we're going to have a better life. If you're a pessimistic attitude, or if you have a pessimistic attitude on this, then I think, my job's going to go away. It's going to change. Everyone's going to be mass unemployment, yada, 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 usually I think what happens is somewhere in between, right? It's never, it seems like it never is quite as great as you think in the time, but it's never as bad as maybe we could imagine in the worst case scenario. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I agree completely. I definitely come in with the optimistic attitude and trying to make sure that I remind myself of that every day coming into work. And it's not because that's hard to do, because we are living in an exciting time. I had a great chance this summer. I had an intern working for me that's going into his senior year of college, and he's a double major, computer science and economics. So I'm glad you bring that up, because he's working on a research paper for me of what is the impact of all these autonomous systems now going to be on the economy. Because if we've got this kind of human machine collaboration kind of stuff, are we going to be able to increase GDP? Are we going to be able to smooth out some of these flexes when the economy goes a little south? Can we actually turn on the robots, turn off the robots? How do we use these kind of tools? So he's working on a couple of models for that. We're going to play around with that and kind of see where that goes. But he still brings this whole new set of energy that says, yes, we can do these things, because there's that naivety, but then there's also the belief of the future is embracing all this kind of stuff. So if we can figure out ways to do that and help support the companies and the innovators that want to do it, and I think we're in a great place here in North Carolina to be able to take advantage of some of those things and tap into the resources that we've got here within the industry, within academia. Some of our government folks are forward thinking too. So I think we can do some really cool things here.
Well, that's very exciting. And Kyle, how do people, what are the best ways for people to reach out to you, connect with you, and learn more?
Yeah. So, of course, I'm up on LinkedIn as a great place there. Kyle Snyder with Michael Best Consulting. Should be pretty easy to find. Make sure you send me a note on why you want to connect, because if it's just random connections.
Could be a bot.
Exactly. Right? I've killed a bunch of those here in the last week that I just don't even try to. And then the Michael Best website, Michael Best Consulting website, michaelbestconsulting.com, has all of our stuff for Best Autonomous Insights, which is our consulting practice specifically on this kind of stuff. So, and then I'm here in Raleigh, so happy to get together and connect with anybody here local, and appreciate the chance to share with you guys.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, this was excellent. Really enjoyed it. And we'll have all the links below so they can find you on LinkedIn. And I do want to see if I can get a video of the update on the helicopter. If you have one, send it. We'll put it down there too.
Will do. I can definitely do that.
You really need to sometimes take a moment and slow down and really notice some of the amazing things that occur. And that's why we're excited about our training that we offer for professionals, really fundamental education on what's going on. I'm going to close with one more question with you. And sure. I want to just ask, how do you keep up with the field? What is kind of your approach to keep up? Because it really is, this is a weekly phenomenon. We did a course on blockchain and all that, and that was moving fast. This is faster than that ever dreamed to be now.
No, so I'm a member of it, and Dana brought it up in my introduction there. So AUVSI is the Association for Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International, and I've been a member with them since 2001. Great organization. It is the trade organization for all things autonomous. But of course, we've supported a lot of AI integration here over the last couple of years as we kind of paint this blueprint for how do we go forward. So I keep up with a lot of things through AUVSI, and then just a bunch of searches. We are going to be launching a kind of a newsletter subscription thing through Michael Best Consulting as a chance to show off, here's where we think things need to go. Here's things that we consider are important for our community and our clients. So keep watching for that and see how to plug in. But we'll be kind of pulling all that together and providing not just a post of here's kind of cool stuff, but a little bit of why we think it's important. So
excellent. Thanks. It was terrific chatting with you.
Awesome. Good to see you, Martin.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, Dana.